So this is question number 6, which is on page 19 in packet number 2. And this question has to do with the comparable interface. Right? And I believe I assigned this chapter in the book, but I'm not too sure at the moment. But we'll go over it again. And what is an interface? Right? An interface is a method or a set of methods that are not defined. They are abstract. And if you implement an interface, you must define that method the way that it is defined in the class, right? So we probably want to get a refresher on the comparable interface because it is one that you're going to find 2 or so questions on the exam on. And if we come over here to the Blue Pelican, you look into the chapters, you'll see chapter 44 deals with comparable and comparable interfaces. What is it? It's very simple. It is just one method, returns an integer value, has a method defined as or named compared to that takes in an object, type object, meaning like not just any object, but just any object, but objects of type object. An object, if you remember, is the superclass of all classes. So basically what this interface, if you implement it, it takes in any object and it returns an integer. And how is this compared to defined? Well, it's defined in such a way where if you run object dot compared to another object, right, it returns a negative number if the first object is less than the second object B, right? And it returns a positive number if the first object is greater than the second object, right? The one that's taken in as an argument. And it returns 0 if they're equal. Right? So you could define compared to any way you want, where A could be a string and B could be a string, right? And you compare the letters, and you could say if it appears earlier in the alphabet, then that means it is less than B, right? And if it appears later in the alphabet, then that means it's greater than B, right? So so the implementation is up to you, right? But this is how it should be defined. So when we're over here, we're saying that rectangle, right? This rectangle class with this set of methods is going to implement comparable. So what does that mean? That means if I have a rectangle R, if I say R dot compared to, and I take in another rectangle, what is it going to print out? Is it going to give out a negative number, a 0, or a positive number? A negative number if the first rectangle is smaller than the second rectangle. A 0 if they're equal, and a positive number if the object that's coming into the method compared to is greater than the object that's calling compared to. Okay, so we're looking at this, right? We're looking at these answers here, and it's definitely not A, because the comparable interface tells you the signature of the method that you need to define, and that signature is, what is a signature? A signature is the return type, right? The name and the arguments. So what do we have here? If we're implementing the interface comparable, we have a method that returns an int, name of it's compared to, and it has one argument, an object of type object. Okay, so we come over here, and this definition has a boolean as the return type. So not A, definitely not A, right? Then we look at B, and B has an integer as a return type. Cool, good. And then compared to is the name, great. And int area, so it takes in a primitive data type of type int, right? Over here, what are we taking in? We're taking in an object of type object, right? So B is not the right answer either. And then we look at C, takes in returns a boolean, so immediately not the right answer. And then D is integer compared to type rectangle, right? So the question here is should it take in a type rectangle or should it take in a type object, right? And the way that compared to is defined in the interface, it takes in type object. So the correct answer is E, right? And when we take it in, we need to typecast it back to being what it actually is in order to get all of its attributes, all of its instance fields, and all of its methods available. And then we can run get area on the rectangle other, right, before making this calculation and returning either a positive number, a negative number, or a 0. So here, answer is E.